Muy buenos días. A nombre del Instituto de Directores.
Behalf of the Institute of Directors, EY, and Santiago Stock Exchange, let me welcome you to the third session of the launching of Chapter Zero Chile, aiming at uh, diving deeper into responsibility of corporate governance on climate change and its environmental impact, social impact, economic impact. Should be noted that this session is part of the agenda of the Global Summit 2021, hosted by the World Economic Forum. So this is being broadcasted to Chile and the world with uh, and that this session will be translated into English. In order to address challenges and opportunities of climate governance, we have today a panel, a multi-sectoral panel. And before introducing this panel, I would like to ask you to send your questions over the WhatsApp number you will see on the screen right now. Your questions will be considered so that we can address them during the conversation. We will be holding with these each one of the speakers. So let me first introduce Macarena Navarrete. Welcome. She's a lawyer, Universidad de Chile, over 25 years of experience. Uh, she's been working with the EY. She joined in 1998 in tax consulting, and she was promoted as a partner in 2016. 2018, she's country manager Chile as being the first woman holding these positions. She leads the executive committee of EY. She's the council of the Latina Sur Committee in EY. She's also part of the board of the Chilean American Chamber of Trade, ICADE, and Chapter Zero Chile. She has been selected for 6 times as the 100 leading women in Chile. Welcome, Macarena. Thank you, Fadwa. It's a pleasure. Claudio Muñoz, welcome. He's the chairperson of Aguas Andina, civil industrial engineer from Universidad de Chile, past president of ICADE, and corporate director. For over 20 years, he's been with the Telefonica Group, where he has been the chairperson and CEO from 2010 to 2018. He's the director of Institute of Directors, the Protectora de la Infancia Foundation, chairperson of the Digital Transformation Center, Universidad de Desarrollo, and chairperson of Chapter Zero Chile. Welcome, Claudio. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you, Fado, for the invitation. My pleasure. Paolo Palotti. Paolo is graduate from Tecli Study di Ancona. He's an electronic engineer. He joined Enel in 1990 as with an important role in different reorganization processes in the corporation. In February 2018, he moved to Chile and is a control and finances director for Enel Americas until 2018. And since then, he's been the CEO of Enel Chile, was helped pushing the energy transition in the country, has led the decarbonization of NL mix, and with an investment plan in renewable generation and promoting the electricity lines in Chile. So, welcome. It's a pleasure being with you today. Your microphone is off, Paolo. Hi, Fado. It's a pleasure for me too. Let me greetings for all of you. Francisco Ruiz-Tagle, you began with CMPC in 1991. You've been the general manager of Celulosa del Pacífico and general manager of the Papelera in Argentina. 2011 to 18, you led CMPC Forestal and CMPC Celulosa. In August 2018, you were appointed as the CEO of CMPC. You have a commercial engineer from Universidad, a business administrator from Universidad de Chile. You have an MBA, University of California at LA, and you're a member of a World Business Council and a member of SOFOFA and ICARE director. So welcome, Francisco. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you, Alfaro, for the invitation. Last but not least, we have Rene Muga. Rene, you are a business administrator from Catholic University with a vast background in the different businesses. Before joining Anglo America in 2019, you were CEO of Barrick, BP, headed out as the Chile General Manager of CPC and VP Corporate Affairs of LAN. You have experience in international economics. You were Director of Economic Affairs in London. You were also CEO Summit in APEC and APEC Business Advisory Council. Welcome, Rene. It's a pleasure having you with us today. Thank you for the invitation. Good morning. Okay, I've made all the introductions of these great panel. I'd like to thank you. For me, it's an honor to be here with you, especially because probably the challenge I have for this panel has to do with the need to discuss among various industries. In climate, we know that the role of the board is key as to how we put in the agenda that we take to the boardroom, but also how we build synergies in the different areas that you're working with. And I would like to start with the first question. In our country is highly vulnerable to climate change, and we believe that Chile, in terms of environmental losses or social and economic losses, these could be really significant. In fact, it is believed that by 2100, we could have a 1.1% annual loss of the GDP because uh, water resources will be affected by climate change. And I would like to start with you, Claudio. What are the measures you are adopting in terms of adaptation? What is to be pushed today to drive as a chairperson of Aguas Andinas? Thank you, Fadwa, for your question. Really, it allows me to trying to understand the problem we face. Many times we discuss climate change, but it's difficult to size what's the impact in Chile. Besides the economic impact, which you mentioned, that unfortunately it's a reality, I believe we have to understand that Chile today is leading, is among the most affected countries by climate change. We are number 18 in the world ranking. We are leading in many rankings, and unfortunately, we're leading among the most affected countries by climate change. So if we go to the water world, that means not only droughts, but a change in the climate. And let me put that into numbers. Uh, Rainfall in the Santiago region, we've been reading that since 1924 in a station at the Quinta Normal area. When we look at that series, data series, well, the decade of that series is the driest decade that we're facing the driest 10 years of the last 200 years. And so what we have to do here, we have to understand that rather than a drought, we have a change in climate. We will have shorter winters on a regular basis, hotter summers, rain where we used to have snow, thawing, and what we lived in last January, the atmospheric river, where we have the most intense rainfall in January in the metropolitan region. So, what we have to do facing these challenge, of course, we have to adapt. We have to change. Probably we'll be discussing this, but I would like to say that there are three transformation levers. The first is investment. Businesses, boards, we have to drive investment to adapt ourselves to climate change. The other one is circular economy approach. We have to put in our strategy how we change our business processes, how we change our business models so that we have zero impact. And this is a great opportunity for innovation, re-engineering, transformation. And the third lever that has to do with how we work together. And that's why I like this panel because it, it represents one of the lever we have to drive from the boardroom. How do we work together? How do we build an alliance to face this challenge called climate change? Really interesting, these three levers, not only thinking of water, but also this cuts across the whole spectrum. Paolo, energy, this is something, it's moving, you're massive adding renewables. Do you believe this is enough in order to develop a emission-free energy sector, energy industry? Probably that's an important point because if we look this at the global level, we see that there is a trend, a strong trend today. Everything is focused on renewables. There are companies leading the process, and there are companies that used to be the leaders in the energy sector, particularly oil and gas, that are now trying to adopting these deep conversion using renewables. So clearly, renewables is it's a reality. And but the question, are them enough? Are renewables enough for us to drive this change? Probably that's a driving force, but not the only one. Look at Chile. Chile has amazing renewable resources, but it's quite vulnerable, as you've said. So, what we need here, it's an effort to lower to disseminate this benefit of renewables down to customers, so to clean the cities, having the ability to act on a sustainable manner, and of course drive this concept of circular economy. Circular economy is like energy efficiency. There are clear numbers saying that with an important impact of circular economy, you can save in CO2 emissions. So that is something that is important to work on. This is something that's being addressed among various industries and sectors. A set of industries can drive this clearly. All these requires infrastructure, an infrastructure for the transport of energy, infrastructure to reach customers with the new services, with a better quality of services. So this whole set is work. It's a commitment. It's a challenge for the energy industry, but not only for us. That you can help us achieve these goals. Innovation. You have sustainability, which is very strong. We have this concept of circular economy that may push this very strongly. Chile here can work a lot, can grow a lot with this. Thank you. Anyone would like to supplement those comments? Maybe there, Rene, when we talk about mining, you always say, sure, mining emissions, but there is a big challenge now that has to do on how you're adding or you're working on circular economy, but also along with your vendors and suppliers, which we know it's a great task in order to decrease emissions by for the whole industry. The work that you are extending, you're expanding to your vendors and suppliers. What are the challenges that you face today? Clearly, with Anglo American, we have a purpose, which is reimagining mining to improve the life of people. This is not only us, but the whole value chain. Mining is changing today. It's becoming an industry where we used to B2B, but now we're becoming a B2C because consumers are now demanding products with greater traceability. As we said, sustainability, for instance. So the effort, it's not something an effort you do as a company. And in Anglo American, we have a well-developed plan, which we call sustainable mining plan, setting goals in line with the sustainable development goals of the UN with metrics to see how we progress in areas such as governance and becoming a reliable and dependable business. We use less water. How do we grow into carbon neutrality? And in social affairs, how we change the way we do business with our surrounding communities. And all those metrics, of course, the addition of the whole value chain is key. The work with our vendors and suppliers is having a growing impact and importance. What we do today in many areas, electromobility, for instance, adding we have a we have electric buses to for our personnel. This is an initiative which is within the framework of sustainability goals, but also in alliance with the bus manufacturers. Well, Paolo is here, and with the company operating the buses. And of course, we are trying to grow in our sustainability goals, but together, because that's the only way to do. And mining, we know this, together with our associated businesses and vendors and suppliers, because that's the only way to achieve a consistent and sustainable growth. So, with these additions, Rene, you've talked about investment, circular economy, working together, infrastructure, these change, these reconversion of the industry. Macarena, how do you believe Chile can stand out today as a leading country in sustainable development? What's the challenge? You work with different industries and different customers in EY, right? Thank you, Fadwa. I believe Chile has to leverage its natural advantages to be leaders in sustainable development. We have northern Chile, one of the cleanest skies in the world, with abundant solar radiation. We have regions with strong winds in the southern Chile, with a huge potential for a clean production of clean energies. Of course, we need the authorities and companies to to bet on the sustainable transformation and for adopting this role, this key role, I believe we are on the right track. We have an energy policy for the long term, and I believe there are certain initiatives which are worth noting. Reaching this as 70% clean energies by 2030. We're setting very demanding goals in terms of the responsibility of the producer and recycling. I was I was looking at the RECAI or renewable energy at Chile was ranked number 11, only after bigger countries in terms of clean energies, and the size of the market also matters. So I believe we are on the right track. The corporate area, more and more businesses are taking this environmental responsibility. They are setting carbon reduction goals, and progress is being made. We have to acknowledge that progress is being made, but also current commitments are not enough. And a key issue here, I believe, is innovation and research, the development in those areas so that new energy sources are good alternatives or for businesses. We see how technology development turned solar energy from something that was extremely expensive in an option that today is much more efficient at competitive prices. So we have to focus on investment and innovation. We have to speed it up and we have to boost it because we have all the opportunities available and those opportunities are to be used.
Thank you, Macarena. And I'd like to use that answer you gave us in terms of R&D and innovation, and Francisco, to ask you, how are you fostering R&D initiatives and innovation initiatives that create environmental, social, and economic value in everything having to do with our native forests? I'd like to give you that question because I believe there's a huge challenge in those terms in southern Chile. Thank you, Falva. Maybe I'd like to start by mentioning the importance of afforestation in this in terms of low emissions. And just to tell you that the challenge is huge, and I believe afforestation needs to be understood as a supplement to lower emissions. I don't mean to say that capturing emissions uh, should not prevent us from doing other efforts, but I'd like to communicate very strongly that this plays a very relevant role, the role of the forests. In, in those terms, we, as a company, we have established very concrete goals in line with the reducing, according to the Paris Agreement, in terms of reducing 2 degrees compared to the pre-industrial era, based on a methodological framework which is called science-made targets, setting up sustainability and environmental objectives. Now, in terms of the industry, we have set out to reduce uh, mm, in the next 9 years until 2030 to reduce uh, emissions by 50%. That means investment and adaptation, as Claudio said at the beginning, in terms of streamlining a number of processes related to emissions. So, on the industrial side, emissions or water consumption reduction, that is coupled with a significant role played by innovation, by introducing circular economy, as we have heard. Um, in our case, we are developing a series of projects related to uh, reuse of byproducts coming from our own processes in order to become an even more circular industry. So we have a significant role to play, and we're working hard on making investment on many of those aspects. Uh, I'd say also that in terms of forestry itself, we must understand that this industry requires lots of research. Today in Chile, we have approximately 15 million hectares of native forest, and that native forest plays a significant role besides forestry plantations in relation to emissions capture. We have worked um, hard doing R&D in terms of conservation. We have 150,000 hectares that are focused on conservation. These are areas where we have developed the projects that entail monitoring endangered species like fauna, our Wemul, for example, uh, or Tolomiro, Wirlo, and other birds that are at the brink of extinction. So we have established alliances with specialized NGOs and organizations working on research and innovation and conservation projects. Maybe there's poor understanding, and I should mention this in terms of how expanding the forestry industry has to do with planting more trees behind us. There's a lot of R&D which has to do with planting better trees. In that sense, I think uh, we choosing better plans, uh, something that adapts better to drought, to climate change, and the recovery of species. That well, clearly that is something that not only has to do with the quantity of things that are being done, but the quality of the things that are being done and the research that is being conducted. Claudio, there are some figures telling us that no matter what, there will be a temperature increase and increase in evaporation. And in that sense, I'd like to ask you, what is the baseline of the agenda of this board, in which the major problem is the scarcity of the resources and such a vital resource, which is water? How are you considering in your agenda the connection with this intersectoral uh, resource? It is a resource that cuts across all industries. How are you handling this? What are you doing? Uh, yes, Falua, climate change in very specific terms, in terms of water availability, means something simple. There's less water available. Santiago, for example, we were used to seeing our mountain range covered with snow cap for a long period until spring. That was our water reserve, if you wish. So we had cycles because of the snowing and thawing used to supply us with water. That changed forever. So what are we doing now? The first lever I said investment. What this means that from Aguas Andinas board of directors, we have fostered a $150 million agenda on investment in terms of building the mega tanks in Pirque. That is a concrete response to climate change. We were not used to face turbidity in Maipo River in summer or in spring. And simply put, a turbid river means that drinking water plants cannot operate. So these mega tanks in Pirque are investments that are giving us some resilience. They allow us to face one of the consequences that climate change has. That's not all. More than $500 million will be invested next in the next 5 years, including uh, deep water wells. We are drilling more than 150 meters deep in order to find water in the aquifers. Well, in order, of course, not affecting the aquifers, basically to supply the southern part of Santiago, we are reinforcing our production facilities, and that's a significant investment in order to giving them more resilience. Of course, we are investing on efficiency in our networks. Mm, we have 13,000 kilometers of networks to supply water, so the investment required in order to support those networks is relevant. Regarding circular economy, I believe this allows us to address your question directly, Falva. Fortunately, at Aguas Andinas, applying the circular economy approach meant not only to supply drinking water, we are treating sewage water, so we are giving new life to water. Uh, the history of our cities in our country meant that sewage water was just discharged into rivers. That is to say, we used to pollute our rivers. Uh, uh, Chile has to be very proud because that is not happening anymore. 100% of sewage or waters from our city are retreated, treated, and regenerated, and they are poured back into the water streams at agricultural quality. Uh, we have eliminated the problem of that contamination. This gives us a new approach to address the water issue, which is reusing water. Culturally, we're going to have to get used for water to be always a scarce resource. So what's left in this circular logic or adapting is how we can reuse water. And that possibility, fortunately, is possible in our region. because we're treating 100% of the waters, we are putting them back to river streams and streams. That gives us another lever to reuse that water in the irrigation of gardens, industrial use, irrigating parks, and that increases the water supply. Therefore, of course, coupled with the investment that we require, we are able to address the climate change that is impacting us. I'd like to remind all our viewers at the top, you will see a WhatsApp number where you can send your questions. And this purpose of understanding that there's a cultural challenge as well for our country, for each one of us, but there's also a challenge to you, Paolo. For example, how are you addressing that transformation inside your own company? So, how you believe you will be able to align this purpose with your own purposes in your company, with your collaborators, and how are you transforming that inside your own companies? Excuse me, Falwa, I had a brief interruption. Please, if you could repeat, because my audio signal was interrupted. I was asking Paolo, Claudio talked about the cultural transformation. That is how to reuse water, our capability of changing the purpose of what we're doing, that so that there is a transformation in our own companies. So the question is, how are you doing this in-house, this transformation? Well, clearly, it's an important transformation uh, because that means involving the board of directors. For example, last year, uh, decarbonization of the energy mix. In,
Plan que en 3 años prevé 2.400 millones de dólares de inversiones.
$2.4 billion investment in a matter of years. So that means an important debate because it also means a direct involvement of the board in these challenges. Everything this is supported at the board level regarding the purpose of our company. The purpose is to open up energy for a more prosperous future and to empower through sustainable development. That means that each one of us has a clear idea of what the goal is and the goal that we need to achieve. And it also means that each one of us understands our own role. One of them is decarbonization. We are going to shut down all our coal-fired units by May 2022. Only one will be left that we have that development, which is a challenge, an even bigger challenge considering the year of COVID that we experienced in 2020 in order to build and start up 2,400 megawatts of both solar and wind. So this means some conviction within the company and also a cultural change, a mindset change, and with innovative tools. If you think about the distribution network in Santiago, which is a grid that serves 2 million customers, that means to actually increase investment on that grid in order to improve the service and to provide new services that allow for the electrification and the use of that electric power by the end customer. This is also a challenge that is extremely important because in the end, producing renewable energy needs to reach the end customer. Digitizing the network to innovate the network and the services to end customers is something that is needs fostering, uh, as well as providing a new set of services to customers involving the authorities, the governments, and also the private world, developing innovation and the enthusiasm about doing things. And now we have a plan to set up electric chargers throughout the country. This is a mechanism that always helps to clean uh, the energy consumption mix and in order to achieve the zero emissions world. That's the task, but we need to do it jointly. Uh, each industry needs to interact with others in order to clearly start up the sustainability concept, the circular economy concept, which clearly means uh, uh, capacity to uh, limit the emissions. So this is a very fine-tuned machine, but this works quite well when the members of the board, the C-suite of companies are convinced about what's needed. Thank you, Paolo. And in that sense, Francisco, if you could please comment in the forestry sector, for example, how the climate change is affecting and what opportunities you see in terms of infrastructure, infrastructure that needs to be modern, that allows for adaptation to climate change. Uh, what opportunities or challenges you see today in the sector? I'd like to start by saying that one of the most relevant changes that I believe Claudio mentioned it before is a cultural change. Uh, I think that is a effort that we're doing as an industry in order to become aligned with global objectives. But I believe this is a very relevant matter. But there's a scientific effort in the world coming from NGOs and global companies uh, to to have information that is comparable, technical, objective, and transparent. Uh, to look at our baselines and to see where we would like to go. Uh, we have worked on a roadmap for the forestry industry with the World Business Council. Uh, actually, well, we did a presentation to United Nations in 2019 in order to align ourselves with the Millennium Goals. That's relevant work. In terms of goals, in terms of this change, this approach to what the global climate change means, these are goals in terms of reducing emissions. Um, that also has to do with relevant changes. Um, things that we're working on. We have processes based on fossil fuels in some factories. Uh, by 2025, we're thinking of changing or reducing them and to actually to go to renewables or to actually put some of this uh, byproducts into that circular economy. In terms of water, we use water in our processes to a significant extent. For example, in Biobío, we have facilities there and we have investment projects that are intended to reduce water consumptions to put them in line with the best standards. We have projects in Brazil and in Chile, which I believe are aimed at best practices, but we still have relevant challenges. At the same time, I would also mention the fact that in terms of the forestry, the impacts of climate change on biodiversity are always uh, challenging us in terms of improving our practices and finding new practices in terms of silviculture, in terms of how to operate the forest. That we have extremely stringent certifications best or most stringent certifications in the world in terms of sustainability and the environment. But since the goal is reducing this 2 degrees globally, I believe the pace at which we're going is still slow, and we need to do even more compared to what we're doing. I would mention that. I believe um, that's what I would like to say now.
Muchas gracias. Macarena,
Thank
¿qué
you,
desafíos se enfrentan
Macarena.
también el efecto del
And
nuevo consumidor
on the
consciente
effect of
y
new
actualizado?
consumers, this is something
¿Y
that has been
considera que la
touched upon.
pandemia
Do you
contribuye
believe
también a
that
esa
companies
adaptación
today are
a
driving
la
an
sustentabilidad y
agenda on sustainability? What practices have you seen
desarrollando hoy en día
on our clients in the different
hoy se encuentra como desafío?
industries and areas? What's the challenge today? See, consumers now and the civil society are more and more demanding from brands, from companies, some sort of commitment in terms of sustainability. These push, this drive force, is that more and more people in their daily shoppings that they try to find environment friendly products. People are willing to pay more for that. Sustainability, after all, has become for companies in a part of the need to add value over the long term. All companies today should be concerned with being sustainable. Otherwise, consumers will penalize them. What we see at EY Chile, we see that concern uh, from our clients in terms of sustainability. But energy and mining, for instance, uh, new energy sources are needed, but the shorter term risks will take the lead. This is understandable considering the impact of the pandemic and the social crisis. I would say that globally is the same when we look at the E-wide risk disclosure parameters. That's June last year. It provides a recommendation on financial dissemination on the environment. Um, and it allows us to conclude that even though the environmental issues are becoming more and more important, organizations do not have a clear understanding of the scope and the size of financial impacts of climate change. And this is again natural. These are complex. These are long term, even longer term and more complex, more challenging than most traditional commercial risks. So, in order to understand these challenges and risks, it's important to consider the ESG criteria. And that's why it is important to see what CMF did this week. Now, opened a public consultation on those standards, including sustainability and corporate governance in the annual report, trying to improve, enhance, modernize the information by adding these ESG on a comprehensive manner. And this will allow us to learn among companies and businesses, the corporate governance structure, the strategy uh, implemented to achieve these goals, and how these risks are being financially managed, which are relevant, of course. Something should be noteworthy. Chilean companies saved more than 27 billion pesos in 8 years by adopting sustainable practices. And this has been quantified by the valuing of negative externalities which were avoided. And all this is part of the Clean Production Agreement report by and the Sustainability and Climate Change Agency by Corfo.
Buen punto el que señalas y también pensando
Thinking
esto
of
de agregar valor
adding
mencionabas
value,
crear
like you said, Macarena, this long-term value adding. Rene, I have a question on what adaptation measures to climate change are working with communities, for instance, in order to increase, to enhance this concept of a shared value, which I believe one of the big challenges we see for the various industries. As we said, there are this is multifaceted challenges. Adaptation, as Claudia says, has to do with water scarcity. Our operations are in central Chile, where we have a shortage of water. So we're trying to recirculate in Anglo American. We're recirculating 80% of the water we use. Um, we are growing into supplying that portion that is not being recirculated using industrial water that will not compete with human consumption. We are assessing some long-term options that using using 100% industrial water in the near future so as to avoid competing with potable drinking water. We have a water management strategy, not only with communities but other stakeholders, to try to find how we can make management, the use and access to drinking water is improved in a way that will allow us to work together with other stakeholders. Aguas Andinas, for instance, we're working at the Maipo River, trying to this is a multi-industry, multi-stakeholder in order to improve the information on the basin and the water management. We're working with our communities, with methodologies and telemetry in terms of more efficient use of APRs, rural APRs, that we've intervened over 50 APRs, which has allowed that the flow and supply of water is permanent. I mean, they don't have interruption. There's no management problems that hinder the regular supply of water. We are basically adding telemetry. We're favoring over 100,000 people in rural areas around our operations in the rural in the Agua Rural program. Maybe other companies, and like I said before, in some sort of alliance, we can see together how these innovations we have developed together with other companies can maybe may extend to the rest of the population. We've been trying to introduce a better management of water in the water discussion groups with communities, so as to make this into a common collaboration approach. We don't. This is not a conflict to be solved, but how do we join together and turn these into a common solution? I believe that different way of approaching by building leadership among communities, which is a big effort we make there, has allowed us to grow into a constructive dialogue, rationale to face a problem that will be with us probably in a more severe way. Great, thank you. Oh, thank you, Rene. Now, I have a question here from the audience, which we received, so that we can. Those are the questions I like because, in a way, this is not only our concerns, but those that are listening. They start to interact and send questions to these chat box. Question is how today this climate emergency has really permeated the agenda of the boardroom. The question is, what topics are you do you see that has to be added starting 2022, which were not in the agenda of the boardroom before uh, uh, 2020? How do you see that new boardroom agenda, and what are those changes? Who would like to who has the annual agenda already in place and adding non-financial issues? Let me discuss our case. Uh, Clearly, In the boardroom, we review on a monthly basis the evolution of the goals, the sustainability and environmental goals we have set. We do a monitoring at the board level, but also we have a sustainability committee to work on these and review these goals. This sustainability committee, the membership is board members, uh, the sustainability manager and corporate affairs, the environment manager, and some senior executives, and they meet on a monthly basis to review all these goals we've set. In every board meeting, the corporate affairs and sustainability manager attends. So this is an ever-present topic. We have added topics such as the reduction of emissions in terms of specific tons of CO2 equivalent, and we have goals in with specific water consumption goals for the company, use of water in different operations, and we have very demanding goals by 20 to 23 to reduce the use of landfills. We will no longer use these landfills, and we have frequent measuring, frequent monitoring, as well as improving preservation. We have a goal of 100,000 hectares of conservation by 2030. So we do the follow up and monitoring as how this is progressing. Those are four topics which are very specific over and above the environmental management of the different operations historically which were not reviewed, which are now being reviewed. We're very much involved. Who else? What other metrics are including in those boardroom agendas? What KPIs, what new topics are being added to your agendas in the boardroom? Paolo, you have to turn your mic on. I can share with you, I mean, confirm what Francisco was saying. That is, our board is very much involved in sustainability. In a monthly meeting we always have an update of from sustainability manager on all these most important topics. We have a sustainability plan together with the corporate development plan. It's extremely connected. Clearly, in this meeting, this board meeting, we discuss environment, climate change, but human rights, diversity, healthcare, safety, relationship with the authorities where we have assets. So clearly, this is a topic. Also, at a committee level, we have a sustainability committee addressing this topic, meeting every month. I clearly look at the evolution of the company and how this company is being measured with all the sustainability rankings where we are involved. To give you an example, we clearly we've been pushing for decarbonization, non-renewable renewables, in a sort of reduction of direct emission of CO2 by reducing by between 2017 2023 by 64%, less than 100 grams of CO2 equivalent. So that clearly means reaching 2023 with 77% of capacity without emissions, with the today, which are around 60, 70% without emissions, to reach nearly 90%. Those are indices that are part of the industrial plan and the sustainability plan, which at the sustainability committee we measure and update, and then we take to the boardroom. Padua, I fully agree with Francisco and Paolo. Maybe let me add a dimension on how the board of directors work. The role of the chairperson is to build the agenda, to say what to discuss in the boardroom. And if I review the Aguas Andinas agenda of the last 2 years, none of them did not include climate change. So that is, every month during the last 2 years, we've added climate change as part of our agenda. In fact, I lead the sustainability committee. I mean, we have a formal, besides our board meeting, with the high frequency, we meet to discuss sustainability in the company. And yesterday we had the board meeting of I was at the end and passed the integrated report. And this means traditionally companies we used to have these financial reports. We decided to eliminate the financial report and we now have an integrated report that besides financial, which is also important, we're now adding the environmental dimension, social dimension, and corporate governance dimension. So I believe these things are happening in Chilean businesses, companies. We have had corporate governance at a corporate governance levels because we know that the climate change issues are highly relevant for the development of our economy. Claudio, along the same lines, this trend of with has to do with emissions and not only going to integrated report, but thinking of the emission trend. Do you believe the emission trend is compatible with the national goal we have today in place? I believe that this is a big challenge, but is absolutely doable. And I believe this is the time, this is the opportunity we have. Let me, again, let me go to things we're doing at Aguas Andinas. And I'm very proud because I believe it contributes to the debate. There was the first water company in the world in publicly committing to the 1.5 degrees reduction by by UN. We publicly stated that we will change. We are already in the process. We will continue to change our business model so as to be compatible with carbon neutrality. That means, in actuality, 76,150 tons of CO2 per year that we will be eliminating. It's hard to size that, but it means uh, 13 million trips of cars less that Aguas Andinas will be reducing. And this is possible, this is doable. Of course, this is a huge challenge, but, and this has been said by everyone else in the panel, through decarbonization, uh, circular economy transformation. This is doable, and this is part of the role of the board. We are demanding measurement, monthly reporting to see how we are growing into achieving the goal. I believe it as we do it with financial management, where we'll look at profits and EBITDA, profit. The same is to be done by the boardroom for our circular models. And look, let me close by saying what I'm learning here is that this will encourage teams. The company teams are really encouraged. They see that it is possible to reinvent the way we do things. This is the value companies have. We are here to reinvent ourselves, and climate change opens up a huge opportunity to show that this is fully compatible. I mean, facing climate change and business and economic development of a society.
I'd like to supplement a bit what Claudio said. I fully agree with Claudio in the sense that, of course, I fully trust that emissions reductions will be achieved. And that motivation that Claudio mentioned is very much installed, and the challenge to innovation is huge for companies, but you can do it. Um, but I wanted to warn everybody about what I said at the beginning, that as uh, but since the emissions goal is challenging, but we need to emphasize on capturing. There's a CONAF and World Bank report that there are about 2.6 million hectares today that have some degree of erosion in the country. And if you think of what was burned back in 2017, that mega fire that we have, there were important levels of erosion that were caused, or problems that where you can do a lot of sequestration. Uh, so there's a significant supplement. The government recognized, or we committed 200,000 hectares of afforestation in COP25. There are possibilities of growing. And the problem we have today is that the level of sequestration globally is low. There's very limited sequestration in the forestry areas that they can be planted, allowing to reduce erosion, improving these levels, improving water capacity. So plantations, there's a lot of criticism that plantations consume too much water, but it's confirmed from UNESCO that these plantations help recirculate water, and also tapping into the water table. I believe there are huge opportunities because this will help achieving the goal. But I also believe that is fundamental to set up uh, incentives, because this is something we all have to do. Restoring an ecosystem, uh, restoring biodiversity needs everybody's effort everywhere in the country. I believe the payment for these ecosystemic services in Chile needs to be developed so that there are incentives, besides the main industries or companies, so that everyone is willing to lower these levels and achieve these improvements. I wanted to mention this because it's expensive. Because when goals are set, we need to find out how they're paid and where. And I believe this is a country challenge and also a challenge to companies in order to come up with proposals along those lines. Macarena, I'd like to ask you because maybe there are two things that I'd like to connect. First, what is EY's commitment with carbon neutrality? Because in general, we see the commitment coming from industrial sectors, but to be able to understand how EY is committing to that goal as well. Yes, I was quiet because I believe from the service side of the industry is a little bit different, and honestly, it's easier, of course. At EY, what we've been doing for the last 12 years, we've been measuring our emissions. Our commitment that was announced January last year was to become carbon neutral. We announced that in the World Economic Forum, and we were able to do it. This year, we launched, we have a new ambition. This ambition is to become carbon negative and net zero by 2025. But for us, being carbon negative at EY means setting a science-based goal in order to reduce emissions, such as investing on nature-based solutions and carbon-based technologies in order to compensate and eliminate carbon. And we will have reached net zero when we are able to reduce our emissions by 40%, in all aspects, getting rid of our residual emissions into the atmosphere through the use of carbon sequestration, carbon elimination technologies. And when we have reached 1.5 degrees Celsius, according to the Paris Agreement, EY emissions are not that high, but it's still important that and because of the same reason, because we are in the service industry, but we are convinced that it's still important that in all sectors we should do whatever is possible in order to minimize our negative impacts. our biggest impact in EY beyond becoming carbon negative or net zero, given our low emissions, will not have such a huge impact. But we believe our biggest commitment, our biggest collaboration, if you wish, it's truly to work with others and help our customers in the decarbonization process and in the process of creating value based on sustainability. At any rate, we are investing globally, and each EY office in the world has to submit a plan in order to adhere to the global goals. What does that adherence plans include? How are we going to increase technology in order to connect with our customers? We need to improve equipment, hardware, and software that are more environmentally friendly. We must come up with a reduction in terms of business trips plans. We need to reduce energy use in offices. We have a plan of uh, mm, of being buyers of clean services and products. So we are focusing on those suppliers that foster their own emissions reductions. And that's great because as some suppliers that were not running on that path and start realizing that companies such as ours and others are choosing to work with cleaner producers and suppliers, and we are able to do it. We are investing on projects that reduce GHG emissions or eliminate carbon from the atmosphere. We have had significant projects with plantations. We buy carbon credits in order to offset our carbon footprint. What I'm going to say is going to make Paolo very happy. This project this year to precisely buy a percentage of clean energy from Enel Generación. We are changing all our LED lighting equipment. We have a plan to reduce traveling expenses. It's this last year has been great. Last year, 2020, has been great in that regard. We were able to reduce uh, our expenses on travel by 96%. Uh, uh, but in 2020 was a very atypical year, um, reducing expenses by $370,000 a year, and that is going to be a reduction of 35% for what we even call fiscal year 2025, which is the second half of 2024 and first half of 25. That is our collaboration, or that's our plan. Thank you, Macarena. And Macarena talked about mitigation, but I believe the mining industry gets the hits all the time. But I'd like to know, how are you mitigating these emissions nationwide? What is Anglo doing? First, we have a very ambitious goal as a company. By 2040. We want to be carbon neutral globally. But in Chile, we want to be even more ambitious than that. And we are thinking of setting a commitment, and we'll do it very soon, before the end of the decade, in our Chilean operations, particularly at Los Bronces, which is our largest, uh, to become carbon neutral. We've taken significant steps. As of January 1st, we have a contract uh, from electric power supply that covers all our needs in our operations in Chile. A contract with Enel of renewable energy specifically. We reduced all emissions uh, substantially. Just to give you a figure, that allows us to reduce emissions of a number of cars compared to the number of cars that are sold every year in Chile. All those emissions of the cars that are sold in a year in Chile are reduced by the kind of contract we've just signed with Enel in terms of power supply as of January this year. But we have something pending, which is the direct emissions, scope one emissions. Those are the ones that happen within our sites, particularly transportation or large haul trucks and movements inside our sites. And we are uh, embarking on a significant project with a partner on technology. As Claudio said, you need conviction, so to speak. That has to do with the cultural shift that Claudio mentioned. It is not. It is not supposed to be only an imposition. This needs to be a different way in which you view business, and that I believe is a radical change in our own business culture. As you know, we are researching with the South African entities and hydrogen fueled whole truck. And it's been quite successful. And we hope to be able to tap into that very soon and to apply it to other operations in, for example, Chile. That is going to be one of the levers that will be available to also reduce direct emissions and being able to make progress in our carbon neutrality objective as a mining operation with the biggest ambition thinking of 2040. And also in terms of mitigation, I would say another interesting, another technological innovation. You know, tailing storage facilities, the one we have in Colina, which is a very large surface area which is exposed to significant solar radiation, and thinking of how to avoid evaporation and the development and creativity meant that together with actually setting up an island that would prevent evaporation on that surface, we set up solar panels allowing to generate the first floating PV plant in the world, and we are really happy with the success we've achieved. And I believe it's also part of some future options. We do not want to compete with Enel, of course. Don't be scared, of course. But we also think these are initiatives that come from our own workers. If our own workers see that the company is actually making an effort to make progress in topics that are important to everyone, and that is our aim, I believe things are much easier, and we can come up with new ideas and innovative ideas in this respect. Paolo, in your sector, what are the challenges that are coming for the coming years? Well, clearly, the challenge is to achieve the goals that we have set to keep on developing a more efficient energy mix, zero emissions, and to reach the customer with a sustainable product that also changes people's lives, improves people's lives. This means investments, innovation. Clearly, I think that companies, the industry, and I think even other industries are ready to make these investments and to use innovation as one of the levers to improve, as one of the drivers to achieve a more sustainable business. But I also think that all of this needs to be coupled with a development, regulatory development, and support that creates a framework within which the company can invest, can develop their plan, because sometimes we have seen that uh, we may have objectives and we may have the enthusiasm of digitizing and transmission network. Uh, we need to we have the will to increase the capacity in terms of renewables, but sometimes there are some elements that become obstacles to this process, or, or that limit the investment capability or innovation or transformation. That needs to be done jointly between the company, uh, uh, the people, and the authorities. This is a country plan. Everything is being mobilized. This is an important objective for Chile. It has all the tools and the possibilities of developing the possibility of developing green hydrogen initiatives in order to keep reducing the level of emissions in the country. Of course, this is a very long-term bet, 5, 10 years. I would say 10 years in order to achieve a green hydrogen context which can be a sustainable expense for the company. Of course, and for that you need to drive investment to electrify the system and to improve all aspects in order to contribute to fighting climate change. This is something that the energy industry can do, but we need to do it jointly with other sectors. It is important, and this is a joint effort by companies, and also in thinking of the long term uh, of the regulatory framework that supports each sector. That is very important in order to share a goal that is a long-term goal. We can uh, we can survive with short-term measures or capabilities, but that limits our capability. That is needs to be discussed in different contexts. I'd like to hear also from the other speakers because this is something that I believe is important.
Sí. ¿A alguien le gustaría complementar?
Anybody
Francisco,
else would like
¿algún
to
sector?
supplement? Francisco, what are you doing? What are you doing in your sector?
Estás en mute.
I agree with what Paolo says regarding connection. I believe it's fundamental that these things need to be worked in all sectors, in all industries. I would say that we are working in terms of waste management. We're working with other companies that reuse a part of our waste instead of sending it to landfills. This is waste that can be used in order to manufacture construction materials that come from sludges that are produced in the pulp industry. We're also working with with the farming sector, with the agriculture sector. We produce ash, and those are used in order to improve the soil properties. That is to say, for uh, we have a number of initiatives in that field that have to do with our goal in terms of not sending this waste to landfills by 2023. I believe I would just reinforce what I said before. We have uh, a very specific challenge in terms of reducing our emissions with very specific projects for the coming years and the different facilities we have, uh, paper and pulp facilities we have. We have a plan of producing 2.4 million tons of CO2 equivalent. The baseline was 2018 to reach half of that by 2030, but we hope we are able to actually hasten that. That means investing on boilers and furnaces and facilities we have here in Chile and Brazil. That's a priority. Which is also a priority for us is the water issue. We have a proposal of reducing our water consumption by 25% in the next 3 or 4 years. That means also improving our processes. We, I think, we have a dedicated plan uh, to increase our conservation efforts. This is a very challenging goal because it's not cheap, and we need to introduce also a number of hectares into those plans so that they are able to help us achieve the climate change goals. We're also working. We're working with universities and with scientists in terms of innovation and development efforts that the country is also conducting. This is part of our main priorities in terms of sustainability and climate change.
Hay una pregunta del público.
There's a question.
Claudio.
I'd like to talking about transformation and I'd like to emphasize on the role of the members of the board. When you think about these challenges, I think the board of directors can play a role in this cultural change, in this change of vision. And let me tell you a very practical example. Traditionally, a water company, water utility was understood as a company that treated waste in the past. we were able to change. Actually, we stopped calling them sewage water treatment plant. We call them biofactories. What is a biofactory? Uh, Turns waste into useful elements for society. And when I was telling you that we are transforming 100% of sewage water from Santiago, this translates into things such as today, we are fertilizing 5,000 hectares of farming land with organic fertilizers in Region 6 and in the metropolitan region. Or we're supplying natural gas to 30,000 households in Maipú district. Or something much more important for people, we are getting rid of bad odors from the city, or, and excuse me for this example, or we're causing people to be able to eat lettuce with no fear. In Remember, many years ago, we were not able to eat lettuce. That is because we knew about the negative impact of using sewage water, discharge into water streams, and then used for farming irrigation. But that's what I mean, reinforcing and opening up to innovation, transforming into having a different look of our companies. I believe that is the key, so that we can develop all the transformation measures to turn it into an actual agenda.
Now to a question from the audience. You are coming from big corporations, and this is part of your agenda, what's happening at the governance level, where you see that there is a greater need for dissemination, investors' expectations. But what do you believe are the main challenges you have, thinking that the boardroom has to address new topics on sustainability? And not only in listed companies, but also thinking of smaller companies or closed companies or non-listed. So, what is the big task do you believe it's relevant toward? What's the challenge today? I would say that a challenge we have has to do with interconnection. We have a challenge of how to connect bigger companies, bigger businesses with smaller businesses. We do that, but I believe this is a task of us all. So, how to align, how to become properly aligned behind a common goal. Of course, as a challenge in itself, we've been talking about this. The commitment with climate change, I believe it's key. Key because companies, I believe we have a responsibility with society. Climate change actually will have an impact on poverty, drought, opportunities. So it is clear this is a critical, challenging topic, and I believe that as what we have said, we all have there are challenges of a like Paolo said, uh, a work of association with governments, NGOs. Not be afraid of facing this. We all have problems. We all have opportunities, and nobody's perfect here. And put challenges on a discussion table. Approach someone for help. I believe that's a key attitude, and the boardroom should be behind this effort. May I? Let me add that what we've been discussing here, value chains. How do we improve that? How do we really make value chain with meeting with the sustainability goals? There are opportunity in small companies, but in bigger companies, you have to find them. Circular economy, which is another concept, that has to be a reality. We have to recirculate or dispose of mining tires. So a small company in Viña del Mar is doing pyrolysis in Chile. We're making the effort of linking a big mining operation such as Anglo American with a small, very small plant, even outside of Santiago, that will do the pyrolysis of those tires. I believe there are opportunities. Probably we need we have to be more proactive in trying to find how to build value chains with sustainability or circular economy rational with a clear view, with a clear path in order to improve and building a value chain, which will be eventually demanded by the market. Macarena, I have a question for you. I believe this is for you because of the type of question. In tax issues, how do you think you can encourage sustainability practices? Uh, in terms of tax, it is key private expenses in R&D. In Chile, a tax is being levied on new cars. Green tax on emissions, according to OECD, this should be uh, bigger, higher. But the IRS considered as necessary expenses those incurred in the blue certification, the clean production agreement between Corfu and Fundación Chile, which aims at strengthening the water management among companies. There are other incentives such as the subsidies and tax reductions in buying a green cars, for instance, green vehicles, tax deductions and subsidies when you make an investment in renewable, non-conventional energy and tax subsidies, tax deductions on or subsidies when you're improving the energy management in buildings or offices. In Denmark, for instance, there is a subsidy based on saved energy in each project. This is really interesting. This is through open bids, uh, open to all companies and industries, where you compete for who can submit the project saving more energy. And in Canada, for instance, there is a fund for strengthening the R&D on clean energy. So, regardless, and we have certain things here, such as the incentive of R&D here in Chile, the tax on new cars, is green taxes, and there's acknowledgement of necessary expenses. I believe we can still learn more and maybe consider some tax deductions and subsidies in order to promote certain behaviors, and also considering these type of things in Denmark, such as these bids, um, setting setting baselines for energy use, and then award those using clean energies or using less energy. It's a specific R&D funds for energy. Each one of you will have 30 seconds. Uh, uh, as this is, every day we see this advertising in TV now. 30 seconds for closing remarks. Challenges this year and the role of the uh, board member. Claudio, thank you, Fado. Couple of ideas. First, transformation is possible. It's doable. We have a room for reinvention and innovation. It is doable. So the role of the boardroom, it's key for this. And the second idea is responsibility as a company. I'm fully convinced that is society properly managing environmental challenges, climate challenges, means being very active in this transformation, active in this role. Thank you. Rene, uh, rather than challenges, I see opportunities, opportunities of combining technology transformation, the digital revolution today. How do we add that in a compatible way, becoming a pillar as strong as sustainability? I believe there is a communicating vessels, the way the way businesses work. We are working way different the way we were working a year ago, and probably next year we will be changing the way we do things, given these changes around the world and the adaptation and the resilience we need in order to face them as a business. Paolo, first of all, let me note that this is a big challenge, but uh, a positive side is people. People are very enthusiastic. In this panel, for instance, each one of you expresses its activity, task, attitude, goal. We're very enthusiastic. This is a sign that every company is going in that direction. So that's a very powerful sign. Responsibility, the responsibility of each companies, big corporations. I mean, back to the previous question, how can you reach smaller businesses culturally by introducing parameters? Also with vendors, could be sustainable, a circular economy. I mean, that's a responsibility to disseminate these concepts as much as possible. Macarena, thank you, Farwa. Something that I believe we should see is trying to be as transparent as possible with the situation of companies around a CO2 emission, because companies have to be measured, should compare themselves, at least at the bigger, given size. Maybe there would be a carbon emission mandatory report. This would increase transparency, along with being very strict on the application of penalties for companies breaching these uh, environmental regulations. Transparency and respect for the law. Francisco, I have a couple of ideas. Climate change is something that matters to people and matters to people working in businesses. If we want to have good professionals into the future, we have to be people want to be in a place working for society, working for improving these problem we have. Second is that invite companies to set goals. So ask companies to set goals. Not all of them have them working on sustainability, but let's set specific goals based on science. Science, and that could be a goal exceeding the local legislation, and also reinforcing what Macarena says, measurement, metrics, and standards. It's not it's not just Chile or for a particular industry or for my particular company. This means joining global measuring agreements, and that goes along with transparency and playing a role, setting a path in the climate change challenge. Thank you. I would like to thank on behalf of EY, the Institute of Directors. I would like to thank on behalf of the Santiago Stock Exchange your participation in our first meeting on the Chapter Zero Chile with Claudio, who is the chairperson. We will be working on different initiatives related to how the board is committed to have an agenda. And there are several things: investment approaches, circular economy, infrastructure purpose, sustainability committee. So many of them will be addressed throughout the year. Thank you. Thank you once again for the opportunity. And let's continue to promote these best practices in the environment in our companies. Thank you.